Okay, so I'm here with Frank Barrera, who is the cinematographer for the film Together, which premiered at Sundance, which is all very exciting. Um, and so thank you so much for being here. Would
Thank
you
you for
mind?
having me.
Yeah, of course. Could you give me a little background about yourself? Just what drew you to become a cinematographer and how did you get your start? All of that stuff.
Well, I mean, do you have
Big question, I know, I know.
4 hours?
Yeah.
I guess. Ooh, yeah. I mean, it is a long sort of story, but I guess specifically how I got into like why did I decide to go into this field? Is that the question?
Yes. I know
So
it's
there's a
a
really
big question.
great yeah it's a real there's a really great long story to this, but I'm going to try to make it short.
Okay.
Basically, I was in senior year of high school. I grew up in a suburb of New York City, and pretty much as directionless as the next as your average high school kid. And a teacher gave me a book, which is called "Swimming to Cambodia" by Spalding Gray, who he was an actor and writer. Um, and the book was about his experiences working as an actor on the film "The Killing Fields," which was a Roland Joffe film. I think it's 1985. Is that right? 1985. I think that's right.
I
1985 or
trust you.
1984. Well, I don't know the answer. So anyway, so he is a comedic writer and hilarious. All of he was known for his monologues, and he wrote many monologues and performed them live, and really funny. And I really connected with Spalding Gray's sense of humor. And in this book, he talks about his experiences working on this film. And there's a particular scene where he plays the ambassador to the United States. The film is about the when the Khmer Rouge came into power in Cambodia in the early 70s, and um, it's a very dramatic scene. It's an evacuation scene. It's as dramatic as you can get. You know, basically the Khmer Rouge is coming. Um, and as soon as they show up, people are going to be imprisoned, people are going to be tortured, people are going to be killed. The country's going to be turned upside down, so the stakes are very high. Trying to get the last Western politicians out of the country. It's a very dramatic moment. But Spalding Gray, in his book, he talks about it's a lot of funny stuff behind the scenes kind of stuff, and really he sort of deconstructs that shooting day. So cut to about a year. I'm trying to make this short. Cut to a year and a half later, I finally see the film. I'd never seen it before, and when that scene comes around, I, of course, as a 18-year-old young person, I'm like, oh, this is. I know all about this scene, and so I'm sure it's going to be weird to watch this because I know all about it. I read the book actually, Swimming to Cambodia. I read the book a few times. The scene shows up, the evacuation scene shows up, and it is even though I knew how artificial the scene was, even though I knew all these details, behind the scenes details about. Uh, I won't go into the details because this will make the story longer, but uh, I still was just so engaged and moved by the scene. It's a combination of like any film, it's a combination of the script, the acting, the directing, the cinematography, the special effects in this example, um, the music, and it's only a few minutes long, but it literally was like a moment where I said, I can't believe that I'm still moved by this scene that I know everything about.
Hmm.
Intellectually, I understood the scene. Emotionally, it moved me, even though it still moved me. And that was it. I said, I want to do that. Like I want to be involved. I had no idea. I had no friends or family, no connections whatsoever in the film business. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But I just suddenly had that moment where I said, I want to do that. I want to go to there. And and that was the beginning of this sort of long journey of going to film school. And um, I went to school in New York, and started working in New York City as an electrician and a grip, working in the lighting department in low budget movies in the late 1990s. Um, and did that answer the question? That's sort of.
Yes. No, that was great. Um, how did how did working in all these different areas like lighting, and I know you've also been like a cam op and a DP, and how do those all complement each other? And if I don't, do you have a favorite job that you've done? Like, do you prefer being a DP over whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, once I got to film school, I realized that it was a directing program. It's
Hmm.
this SUNY Purchase up in Westchester County, and it's a director's program. But by the second year, I realized that I wanted to be a cinematographer, and so I started focusing on that. And so I've always wanted to be a cinematographer, and pretty much everything I did, every decision I made uh, was always focused on how to get to that point where I could be a cinematographer um, on feature films. So the answer is, being a cinematographer is my favorite um, uh, job. And yes, working as a gaffer, I worked as a gaffer for several years in New York on low budget movies and commercials, and I did a little bit of work as a key grip, but not very successfully. I never really worked in the camera department until I started operating.
Mm.
And yeah, all of the little lessons I've learned over the years in all those different fields, I feel like I'm constantly going back every day. And I know that might sound a little crazy, but um, there's no. It feels like there's no lesson that is very far behind in my mind. So I always look at the path. Everyone always looks at their path, and whatever career you're in, you think about your path, and maybe how could it have been better? How could it have been more efficient? Were there mistakes that you made? Um, and I I always have enjoyed looking back at my path because I've always learned so much along the way. Um, so yeah, that's a long-winded answer.
No, great answer. Perfect answer. So in your career, you've done cinematography, you mentioned for commercials and then also features and also TV shows. So I was just wondering, how do you approach doing those different things? And if, any of the big differences between any of those.
Well, primarily, I don't really do too much commercial work. When I
Hmm.
was a gaffer, in New York, I did a lot of commercials.
Okay.
But once I started shooting, I really it was just really movies, and slowly, as the internet took over, it became TV shows as
Hmm.
well. So for me, it's about television and features, and then of course my experience in television has really been strictly comedy, mostly 30-minute comedy stuff, or a lot of improvisation, a lot of skits, a lot of parodies, which has been really fun over the years to recreate other movies and TV shows when you're in the course of making fun of them. Um, so my experience has been television, and then these movies that I've done, and the approach, it's I guess I would say when you're approaching a film, a feature, it feels very much, and I like to approach it as a blank canvas in a lot of ways. Obviously, the director and producer, um, it's their canvas, but it feels like one of the reasons I'm drawn, and most one of the reasons why many people are drawn to feature films in terms of production is because you feel like you can create a whole world, and there's a certain freedom in that process. Television is not the same, of
Mm-hmm.
course, because you have all these levels of there's the studios involved, there's many writers, there's producers, there's of course always the showrunner who is a singular person, but they are the ones who are trying to bring all these disparate characteristics and aspects to turn it into a TV show. So when you're working on a TV show, it's so much more about um, I guess I should know I should have a better answer for this and but it's more about the business of the sort of the I mean I don't want to say anything negative, but it's sort of like there's sort of like a more of a factory
Mm-hmm.
mentality
Mm-hmm.
when you're making television. um, Now for me, that's been fine. I'm not saying it as a critique.
Right.
For me, it's been great because I've been doing all of this comedy. So at the end of the day, we're sitting there watching great comedic actors saying really funny things, and it's joyful.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of like being a cinematographer, let's say on a comedy show, for most of them, the cinematography usually always, unless there's a joke in it, you really want to take a step back with the photography and let the words and the actors and the director um, let them have the space, which I think also winds up informing how I approach making movies, and that I do want to in a movie. I also it's really important to me to create a space for the actors and the directors to to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference in approach. It's the television production. It's um, it's much more of a technical pursuit than it is a creative pursuit. And maybe somebody's gonna yell at me for saying that.
You worked on Wet Hot American Summer, the shows, right?
Yes,
Oh, I
I
love those.
operated. I operated and also did some second unit cinematography. Yeah, I've known those folks for a long time.
That's
I went to
awesome.
I went to college with a lot of the principal writers and actors.
That's awesome. Yeah, I thought those were a blast.
Yeah,
Um,
they're
yeah.
it's so fun. And then it was amazing to come back. We did we did the Netflix show,
Mm-hmm.
and of course there's always talk about doing it again. I mean, the cast is so amazing, and I've been very fortunate in that way in my career where I tend to get lucky with cast uh, who wind up years later they get great success, um, and there's always this it's sort of like a there's a camaraderie about
Mm-hmm.
the process, and these people are always just so warm and inviting and generous. um, so I've been spoiled with a lot of the TV I've done because the actors have been extraordinary. It was super funny, and there's nothing like going to work and laughing
Yeah.
most of the
Well, I for one tell them that Anna Harrison supports more, so that'll get it going. I'm sure of it. So you mentioned this a little bit about how TV is a little bit more regimented in terms of what you do, but if you're just working on a single episode of a TV show that's been running, how do you make it feel cohesive to the TV show as a whole while still sort of, bringing your own style to it?
day. Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, I have done a number of uh, episodes where it wasn't. Normally you have a lead cinematographer for any TV show, and then
Mm-hmm.
occasionally, for various reasons, you'll have visiting cinematographers. So I have done that a couple of times, and it's it's paramount that when you do that, that you whatever style that you may or may not have, you really need to check that at the door, um, because and of course it depends on the type of show, but
Right.
especially in comedy, it's pretty regimented, as you say. Um, there's expectations by the viewers who are the fans of the show, and they want the show to look a certain way. So it's um, it's always an opportunity for me to sort of go into somebody else's head, which would be the cinematographer's
Mm-hmm.
head, and also the showrunner. So the showrunner of any show and the director of photography, they really create the look of the show. And traditionally, you'll have visiting directors who come and go, as well as visiting writers. And
Mm-hmm.
traditionally, it's the showrunner and the director of photography who are really the people who are there all the time. Um, and so when you come in as a visiting cinematographer, it's really important to understand the show. And so I have done that. And, uh, I it is not a place for you to express yourself. Now, that having been said, I just did actually last week. I did the same. I was a visiting DP on a show called Good Trouble, which is
Mm-hmm.
a free-form show. Um, and what's interesting about that show is that actually there's a lot of freedom in terms of the visuals. And
Mm.
a good friend slash colleague of mine, Marco Fagnoli, who's the DP on that show, he created this look along with the showrunner. Um, it's very expressive, and we break a lot of rules on the show. Things can be out of focus. So you can have flares in the lens. You can do strange framings where a character can be down here instead of a more traditional framing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really part of the style of that show. And so I visited with them a couple of times actually, and it's really fun because you're encouraged to have fun and push the envelope. So I've never it's my only that's the only example of a show that I've been able to do that with. And I know there's a lot of dramatic shows on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu where there is a lot of expressiveness going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine it would be a similar experience to that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
So to circle back a bit to the reason that you've been at Sundance together.
yes.
So you mentioned that you compared features to more of a blank canvas. So, how did you, I guess, paint the canvas of together? And also, how did you initially get involved with this?
Yeah, Nikole Beckwith and her producer Anthony, they were looking for a cinematographer for their movie, um, and I guess they cast some sort of wide net, um, and long story short, I wound up in an interview with them, and it turns out that they were familiar. Anthony and Nicole were familiar with my work with Patrick Wang. Um, and they really responded to that work. So it's Patrick. We could talk about Patrick uh, later, but Patrick makes these really interesting, sort of non-commercial films,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was really fun to know that Anthony and Nicole were familiar with Patrick's work, and they really responded to the way that Patrick makes films and tells a story. So we hit it off in our interview and continued that conversation, and they wound up hiring me. And you know, Nicole, as a filmmaker, is a dream. She's super smart, super funny, super creative, um, and knows exactly what she wants, um, and usually knows how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But then also she is secure enough in her talents that when she doesn't know the direct path to get to a place, she asks help. She asks for help, and which is really wonderful. I mean, this is filmmaking is a collaborative effort, and
Mm-hmm.
so uh, you know, being a director of a film, you need to be a leader, and you need to get the best out of your crew and your creative team. And so Nikole has a really wonderful way of doing that, and so it was sort of like these little building blocks of trying to create this, starting from the blank canvas. Um, she had a lot of great ideas about what she wanted to do, and we just started a conversation about how to do that. Um, and yeah.
So you mentioned that it was very collaborative. So, I was wondering how much rehearsal did you have, or how much planning goes into it versus was there anything that changed sort of last minute that you had to uh, improvise, or was it all rehearsed before, mostly in like set?
There's a lot of questions in there.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Um, in terms of, we've all made, I've made a few low budget movies, both as a cinematographer and as a gaffer. And there's sort of a low budget formula. It's essentially this 18-day shoot,
Hmm.
which we're all very familiar with. And so, ideally, when you break down your script, it's the math of it, and that's where your assistant director shines, and the producing team shines, where
Hmm.
they say, well, this is what the amount of time we have. Um, this is our budget for locations and etc. Uh, what is the best version of this film? And that's always what we're trying to achieve, the best version of the film. One of the things I like to hold on to is the idea that nobody cares that it was a low budget movie.
Hmm.
Nobody cares. Uh, at the end of the day, the viewer wants to watch something and be transported. They want to be moved, whether that's a comedy or an action thriller or a romantic comedy, whatever it is, a drama. Um, they want to be moved, and they don't care if you had $200,000 or if you had $200 million. It doesn't matter, and so that's something I always focus on. And I feel like when I read a script, as I did when I read Together, um, I'm constantly looking. Well, I read the script a couple of times, and I each pass, I have a different mindset, and one of the passes is the mindset of, can we do this movie for the budget that, and I
Hmm.
know what the budget is, and and I see, I sort of tabulate. Well, that scene, yes, I know we can do that. I know we can do that. And here's a scene perhaps where that's going to be a challenge on a limited, on an 18-day schedule. This is going to be tricky. So you start sort of going down that list, and so that's where the plan comes in. And as Nikole and I work together during prep and shot listing, and we went location scouting with the production team, and it's just a constant sort of, I guess, uh, I like the idea of, the metaphor of the building blocks. You're
Hmm.
constantly building, but it's also like a Tetris thing. So it's everything fits very tightly together, and then you get to the next level and you fit all those pieces together, and it's just sort of a painstaking process, which I really enjoy. I love prep is awesome because you, even though you do have the limitations of your budget and your schedule, within the parameters of that, there are no limitations.
Hmm.
So, and it's problem solving and figuring out, well, we were only going to have, for example, we're only going to have 4 hours in a particular location and we have 3 scenes. How are we going to do that? And make it feel like the rest of the film,
Hmm.
and make it feel like it's in part, and it doesn't stick out somehow. So, I think I forgot the question.
Oh, no, I just that you basically answered it. Just, the rehearsal process and the planning and
Yes. Yeah. Well,
if
the rehearsal
anything
process, actually,
changed.
I was not part of the rehearsal process at
Okay.
all. Um, Nikole worked with Ed and Patti um, at her uh, at her house for a short period. You know, they had several meetings where they worked on the character and on the script, um, and I was not a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and on different movies, it's different. On some movies, I am invited to the rehearsals. On this one, I wasn't, and I never think of it as a personal thing.
Yeah.
Um, it's very much I have so much faith in, especially with any filmmaker that I work with. I uh, There's a lot of cinematographers like to talk about how they support the director, and it's a real thing, and I take it very seriously to support the director and in her decision, um, for example, to not invite me to a rehearsal. um, Makes it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I had plenty of other things to do, and so that's just just a little insight into this particular project.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I sort of was, to be quite honest, I was surprised. Once we started shooting, I wasn't really sure what to expect from the performances, and so there was a discovery there that was really exciting for
Yeah.
me.
I mean, did that, since you were seeing the performances the day of, uh, pretty much, did that change anything on for what you had planned, or did it just add to the whole experience?
I mean, it added, yes, I think it added to the whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
We did it make us change anything? No, I don't think so. And again, like that's part of one of my focuses, which I learned very quickly in TV comedy, is creating a space for the actors and the director to do their work.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Like a
and
sandbox or something?
like a sandbox, yeah. I mean, sometimes we cinematographers talk about lighting spaces rather than lighting people,
Mm-hmm.
and in comedy, that's sometimes something you have to do. And so I've learned how to do that and make it not feel like that's what we're doing. Because you want to give freedom. Sometimes um, the actors like to move around a lot, let's say. So, uh, traditionally we have marks on the floor where an
Mm-hmm.
actor is supposed to walk into the room and the actor hits the mark and says the line, and there's this beautiful light hitting them right in the perfect spot.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes actors don't want to hit the mark. Um, and that's fine. That's part of the process and part of the creative process for everybody who's trying to tell the story. So I've learned over the years how to light spaces in a way that doesn't feel like I'm lighting the space.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, whenever we go in for coverage, when I say lighting the space, strictly meaning the wide shot.
Yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
wides and the mediums, um, giving the actors room to roam if they so choose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not giving them a mark. I feel like for some actors, they really appreciate that because it's a very technical thing to hit a mark,
Right.
and some actors are fine with it, and some aren't. Some struggle with it, but so it's really fun to let them know that they can go wherever they want to, and it gives them a freedom. It also gives them the first time I tell that to an actor, if that is in fact how we're doing it. For
Mm-hmm.
example, on Together, on the first couple of days when I let Ed and Patti know in a particular scene, I was like, well, where do you want to? They're like, Frank, where should I go? I'm like, you go where you want to go. Like that's up to you and Nikole. And it's always fun to get that first reaction from that, especially from Ed, who's has a tremendous career,
Mm-hmm.
and he has worked with a ton of different cinematographers,
Yeah.
and I'm sure he's worked with his fair share of cinematographers who said, Ed, you need to hit that mark, otherwise you're not going to look great or something. So it's always fun to give them that freedom. Um, yeah.
So you also mentioned earlier, you were talking about Patrick Wang, who you often collaborate with. So I was just, could you just, I don't, again, this is a really big question, but would you mind just kind of giving an overview of how your working relationship began and how it's evolved?
Yeah. Patrick and I, on his first film, he has made, wait, four or five. He's made five. Wait, what is it? He's made in in the family, Grief of Others, and then he's made four films. He's made four films. Sorry, you can you can edit that out, can't you?
Of
Uh,
course, movie magic.
so Patrick has made four films, and I've shot all of them. And when we met, I was interviewed for his first film, In the Family, and his producer Andrew Vandenhouten had seen a film that I had made earlier called Runaway, which is a psychological thriller um, by Tim McCann, and but we had elements of the type of filmmaking that uh, I think Patrick definitely responds to, and I think
Hmm.
Nikole Beckwith also responds to. It's sort of this idea of you know, setting a frame and letting the actors sort of live in the frame, and letting the moment hang, if you will, and not just like fast editing and fast action and all that stuff, which is fun, of course, to watch, but it's just not. It's not necessarily what excites me. What excites me is allowing it's sort of creating a proscenium,
Hmm.
in a theatrical sense, um, and allowing the story and the actors to inhabit this frame. So Patrick had seen some of my work. We met in an interview for In the Family, and we had a lot of similar tastes for films. And so we made that first film, and it did really well for him. And he's made a couple since. So he's an interesting filmmaker.
Hmm.
Very small budgets, very confined storylines to a certain degree, um, and again, it's there's something in their strength when you're given parameters. Again, going back to prepping, let's say a low budget movie, when you're given those parameters, you have to make a decision. You can choose to feel that the parameters are holding you in and restraining you, or you can feel that they're forcing you to open up new ideas and new ways of telling the story. So Patrick and I have worked a lot on that sort of that process of working within the constraints and,
Hmm.
and, and allowing that uh, to be a process of discovery
Hmm.
on different ways to tell a story.
And earlier you had mentioned that Nikole Beckwith specifically, I think, brought up what you had done with
Yes.
Patrick about for Together. So I was wondering, I mean, they I have not seen Together. I wasn't able to get a screener, but um your films with Patrick Wang seem a little more like experimental, I guess.
Mm.
So I just want like, did that translate to Together, or did you have to, any adjustments that you had to make from that style? And I guess I'm just asking, what are the main differences between something like a bread factory versus Together.
Um, well, that's a good question. Um,
Got some big ones today.
yeah, it's a big question. Um, I would say Nikole and Patrick both. Um, they come from a very they come from a strictly a theatrical background. They
Hmm.
both worked in the theater
Awesome.
quite a bit, and what's interesting about it, and I sort of hadn't really thought about this, is I shot Patrick's first film, and now this is Nikole's second film.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of similarities. I mean, no matter how talented of a filmmaker you are, your first couple films are going to be unique because you're learning.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, I saw Patrick learn technical things on our first film together, and I saw Nikole learning some technical things. Um, and what's so wonderful about both of those experiences is watching them learn something, and then their minds are so um, uh, I mean, I want to say powerful because that's the only word
Hmm.
that comes to mind. But like, uh, they are they learn something, and that's it. It's in there, and there might be something that they learned, a technical aspect of the filmmaking process, and then days, weeks, months later, they bring it up as if it's something that they've known their whole lives, and so there's a lot of similarity in that. But I think that the theatricality, not in a pejorative sense,
Hmm.
um, again, the proscenium, creating a frame, um, and then allowing the actors, it's almost sort of, um, it feels very much like we're protecting the fourth wall in both. I would say the similarities between Patrick and Nikole is protecting the fourth wall for the most part,
Hmm.
and starting from that perspective, and again allowing the actors to inhabit a space as if it was a play. Um, and I just sort of as a side note about this style of filmmaking, theater. One of the main uh, benefit of going to the theater is seeing live
Hmm.
humans acting, and there's also sort of a danger to it. Anything could go wrong, and somebody could forget a line, somebody could mishandle a prop, uh, somebody misses a cue, but
Hmm.
it's live theater and it's so exciting. And I feel like both Patrick and Nikole, they're exploring that. We're basically recording in a lot of ways. We're recording a theatrical experience in certain ways. Of course, you know, Nikole, we went in when together we did a lot of traditional coverage,
Hmm.
but the spirit and the essence of the scenes were always played out in some sort of a wide shot, and more often than not. Whereas with Patrick Wang, we really lean into the wide shot being the only coverage often.
Hmm.
Um, and again, there is a budgetary constraint, the budget constraint and the schedule constraint, but then it forces you to discover different ways of telling a story. So to have like a particular, like let's say you have a wide shot, locked off camera, and you have a dozen actors performing, doing the scene, and let's say it's a 3-minute scene. Um, it's so exciting to, I mean, just like actually as I say it, it's like it's so exciting because it's dangerous,
Hmm.
and that's you don't have to go back to talking about television. We always know when we're shooting TV, we always know we have this close up, we always have this cutaway. If a performance isn't working right, we know we can change that because in the edit we can always change these things.
Hmm.
um, and so allowing it to play out more is it's it's exhilarating to sort
Yeah.
of do that, to sort of explore that kind of filmmaking, and that's why I feel so fortunate to have been able to have that experience with Nikole and Patrick, of course. Um, but having that experience with Nikole was, it's just, it really is. I don't. I should think about how I should talk about this because it's like I'm not a writer, but I'll preface what I'm about to say by saying I'm not a writer. But
Okay.
But there's just something so magical
Hmm.
about being in the room with a couple of actors with a great scene, a really well written scene, and the actors and the director have done their homework and they've rehearsed, and just seeing that sort of thing come alive in front of you. It is exactly the way it feels when you go to see theater.
Hmm.
When you're sitting there in the third row and you're looking up at these actors, it is there's just no it's just this it's a magical experience, and so
Hmm.
that's what drives me. I want to be a part of that. So I feel really lucky that I've been able to do that.
Yeah. I love that theater comparison because I mean I was almost a theater double major or minor and I dropped it. But theater is still, very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's great. Um, okay, so we're on to my last question. And
Okay.
hopefully it's not as okay, well, it's kind of a big question, but hopefully it's not as serious. But it's just um what are some of your favorite movies just based off just from from a cinematography standpoint?
Mm, yes. This is a favorite question of cinematographers, and so I'll give you my answer, which is a little jerky.
Okay.
Um, I don't I don't think that's a thing. Like I don't adhere to the idea that you can have great cinematography. Uh, well, I guess I'm also being presumptuous. I think what the question often is, forget about the movie. What's forget about whether the movie was good or not. What's your favorite cinematography? Like, was there a movie where the cinematography is so great, but like the movie's not great?
Yeah.
And people have that conversation, and
Mhm.
it happens all the time. And so I'm the jerk who says that I'm not going to participate in that conversation because again, it's a collaborative effort,
Mhm.
and it's the writing, the directing, the acting, the production design, the sound, the music, the photography. It all comes together, and this is what's so wonderful about the medium is that you have all these different parts that come together, and sometimes they come together and it doesn't work. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of movies we can talk about, which maybe we shouldn't, but there's a lot of movies we could talk about that are just terrible.
Yeah.
And as students of film, you can watch a movie that doesn't quite work, and you can pick it apart and say, well, I think it was the writing, or I think it was the performance, or I think it was the directing, or I think it was
Mhm.
this, that, or the other thing. So the other thing to talk about, if we say, well, what's a great uh, uh, what are movies that have great cinematography but maybe they weren't great movies, then of course we're insulting the filmmakers
Right, right.
in a public way. So I'm not gonna. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why I don't. Another reason why
That's
I don't
fair.
want to do that. Um, but I would say, you know, I'm trying to think about recent films. Um, I would say a film that is off the top of my head. Moonlight is a
Mhm.
film where everything comes together in
Mhm.
my mind, and the cinematography is very strong,
Yeah.
and this expressiveness, the ability for that for the camera to add, you know, and a lot of sometimes a problem is you can have technically wonderful cinematography, but it distracts or
Mhm.
it detracts from the story. So it's very difficult. I mean, as you know, it's very difficult to make a movie.
Mhm.
It's almost impossible for the all these reasons, like the raising the money, getting the cast, blah 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 blah. Just all of it is so difficult. Um, and the cinematography is this delicate balance. You want to support the film, you want to support the story as much as you can without detracting. And if it's going to be a very bold look, like Moonlight, um, they hit the right tone in that film. Another example is Nebraska,
Mhm.
the Alexander Payne film. Again, just really bold decisions that really fit quite nicely in with You know, honestly, most I I sometimes struggle when I start watching a film and the cinematography jumps, off the screen
Mm-hmm.
and calls attention to itself.
Right.
It's a little bit of a red flag to me sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's genre pictures where you can have a science fiction film or maybe a psychological thriller where you that's completely appropriate.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, but sometimes in dramatic pieces, it's a delicate balance. Trying to find that.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a couple of examples.
That you turned my like, not throwaway, but my fun question into you had such a great response to that. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I was not expecting that, but it was awesome. So yeah, those are all my questions.
Terrific.
Um, yeah, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciated it. I thought this was so interesting and I learned a
Cool.
lot. Yeah, it was really great. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, and I appreciate it.